Sometimes, love doesn't break your heart. People do. He wanted a perfect Valentine's Day. Flowers, gifts, love. But what he found changed everything. In one night, heartbreak led him to someone who would teach him that love isn't meant to hurt, it's meant to heal. Two souls, both broken by life's cruel timing. A story that reminds us, sometimes the wrong person leads you to the right one. This is a story of betrayal, healing, and love that blossoms from pain. Watch out for more emotional, heartfelt stories from sweet Serenity BL. Ethan Cole had spent weeks planning Valentine's Day. He wanted everything to be perfect, just like the way he imagined his relationship with Adrian Blake. He'd saved money from his part-time job at the bookstore, walked through half the city to find the right bouquet of deep red roses, and even wrapped the small box of cufflinks he'd ordered online, a gift he was sure Adrian would love. The streets buzzed with couples walking hand in hand, laughter spilling from cafes, and heart-shaped balloons bobbing above vendors' stalls. But none of it compared to the excitement thrumming in Ethan's chest. Today wasn't just Valentine's Day. It was proof to himself that love was worth the effort, even if it meant giving more than receiving. Adrian wasn't perfect, charming, but sometimes distant, affectionate, but always secretive. Still, Ethan believed in holding on. After all, love required patience, right? With his gifts tucked under his arm and his heart bursting with anticipation, Ethan climbed the familiar staircase to Adrian's apartment. He had rehearsed the moment in his head. The door opening, Adrian's surprised smile, the kiss, the warmth. It was supposed to be magical. But fate has a cruel way of revealing truths at the wrong time. When the door creaked open, Ethan's smile froze. The sound of muffled laughter and the unmistakable rustle of movement came from inside. Confused, he stepped into the dimly lit living room, calling Adrian's name softly. And then he saw it what no amount of patience, trust, or daydreaming could have prepared him for. Adrian was there. Yes, but not alone. His hands gripped someone else's waist, lips pressed in a fevered kiss. Ethan's chest tightened, his breath caught, and the world tilted sideways. And when his eyes adjusted to the scene, the face of the other man turned toward him, guilt painted across every line. Julian Hayes. His best friend. The one who had listened to Ethan rant about Adrian's mood swings. The one who had promised he'd always have Ethan's back. Julian. The roses slipped from Ethan's trembling hands, petals scattering across the hardwood floor like tiny pieces of his heart. The box of cufflinks fell next, the sound louder than the silence that followed. Adrian pulled back lazily, not even startled, while Julian scrambled, muttering Ethan's name like a prayer of apology. "Ethan," Adrian said coolly, his voice flat, "you weren't supposed to come over today." As if Ethan were the intruder, as if his presence were the problem, not the betrayal that had just gutted him. Ethan's throat burned, his vision blurred. He stumbled backward, refusing to listen to their excuses or worse, their indifference. The air inside the apartment felt toxic, suffocating. Without another word, he turned and fled, tears spilling down his cheeks as he raced down the stairs, past the couples still laughing in the streets, past the glow of Valentine's decorations that suddenly mocked him. By the time he reached the bus station, his chest heaved with sobs he couldn't contain. He sank onto a bench, hugging himself, ignoring the curious stares of strangers. His roses lay somewhere in that apartment, crushed under careless footsteps, and with them, his illusion of love. He wasn't just heartbroken, he was humiliated. Betrayed by two people he had trusted most. And yet, in the midst of his despair, someone noticed. Across the station, a man sat with his head buried in his hands, a sleek leather bag at his side. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, his tie loosened, and he radiated frustration the way Ethan radiated grief. After a long moment, the man glanced up, his eyes catching Ethan's tear-streaked face. Their gazes locked briefly to strangers, bound by invisible threads of disappointment. The man moved closer, cautious yet concerned. "Hey, are you okay?" Ethan sniffled, swiping at his cheeks. "Do I look okay to you?" His voice cracked, sharp from pain but not unkind. The man chuckled softly, not in mockery, but in empathy. "Fair enough. Bad day." "The worst," Ethan whispered. He hesitated, then blurted, "I just found my boyfriend making out with my best friend." The man exhaled slowly, leaning back on the bench. "And here I was thinking my day couldn't get worse. My family's breathing down my neck, trying to marry me off before they'll hand me the company. Imagine being forced to pick a spouse like you're ordering off a menu. Ethan turned to him then. Truly looking, the stranger's eyes were striking, calm yet stormy, the kind that carried stories even in silence. There was something grounding about the way he spoke, as if his presence alone anchored Ethan's spiraling thoughts. They sat there, two broken souls, in the chill of Valentine's night, talking as if they had known each other longer than 5 minutes. His name, Ethan soon learned it, was Damian Rivers, a man trapped by duty while Ethan was trapped by heartbreak. Their burdens were different, yet strangely parallel. The buses came and went, headlights cutting through the night, but neither moved. In their shared confessions, Ethan about betrayal, Damian about suffocating expectations, they found an odd comfort. For the first time since the roses hit the floor, Ethan felt seen, not pitied, not mocked, but understood. And though he didn't know it yet, that meeting, the accident of heartbreak and timing, was the beginning of everything. The night at the bus station could have ended like any other fleeting encounter, to strangers sharing burdens, then disappearing back into their own separate worlds. But fate had other plans for Ethan and Damian. The very next morning, Ethan woke up with swollen eyes and a hollow ache in his chest. His phone buzzed repeatedly with unread messages, half-hearted apologies from Julian, dismissive words from Adrian, and a concerned text from his mother. He ignored them all, but one notification stood out. A new number, a simple message. "Hey, it's Damian. I hope you got home safe last night." Ethan stared at the message longer than he intended. It wasn't flowery, it wasn't invasive, but it carried a strange warmth. In the blur of heartbreak, that small check-in felt like an anchor. Against his better judgment, Ethan replied, "Yeah, thanks, and you." From that moment, a rhythm began, texts in the morning, quick calls in the afternoon, and long conversations that stretched into midnight. They didn't talk like strangers anymore, they talked like two men who had found in each other a safe place to unravel. Damian, despite his posed exterior, was surprisingly candid. He spoke of his family's empire, a chain of medical facilities, and the unyielding pressure to marry before he could officially inherit control. "They don't care if I'm ready," he confessed one evening. "They just want a picture-perfect heir with a picture-perfect wife by his side." Ethan would laugh softly, though his own chest carried scars. "At least you're not being cheated on by your so-called best friend." But beneath his sarcasm, he admitted how much the betrayal had fractured his trust. He wasn't sure if he believed in love anymore, or if love had ever been what he thought it was. What surprised Ethan most was how easy it was with Damian. There were no mind games, no walking on eggshells. Damian never made him feel like he was too much or not enough. Their conversations flowed naturally, sometimes heavy with confession, sometimes light with banter. It was strange, almost disorienting, to find solace in someone so quickly after being torn apart. One Friday night, about 3 weeks after Valentine's Day, they found themselves at their favorite cafe, an unassuming corner spot near the bus station where it all began. Ethan was nursing a cappuccino, while Damian, tie loose and jacket off, leaned across the table with a small smile. "You're healing," Damian said quietly, studying him. Ethan frowned. "How can you tell?" "Because you're laughing again," Damian replied simply. "Even if it's just a little." Ethan's chest warmed at the words, though he quickly masked it with a smirk. "Careful, Damian. You'll make me think you actually care." "I do," Damian said without hesitation, and the sincerity in his tone silenced Ethan for a moment. The cafe hummed with quiet chatter around them, but in that pocket of space, Ethan felt something shift. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was trust. And after the wreckage Adrian had left him in, trust felt more valuable than roses or promises. A week later, Damian's request came out of nowhere. They were walking by the river, late evening lights reflecting off the water, when Damian stopped suddenly. "Ethan," he began, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness, "I need to ask you something important." Ethan raised a brow. "You sound serious. What's up?" Damian took a deep breath. "I know this might sound insane, given how we've only known each other for a month. But I can't keep pretending I don't see the way things line up. You and we met when we were both at our lowest. And somehow, you've made this bearable. My family won't ease off until I settle down. They want me married, and they won't give me control of the company until I am. So," he hesitated, searching Ethan's face, "marry me." The words hung in the air like a storm about to break. Ethan blinked, stunned, You can't be serious. I am. Damian's eyes didn't waver. It doesn't have to be forever. It can start as an arrangement, but I think it could be more. We're good together, Ethan, and maybe just maybe it's what we both need. You need an escape. I need a partner. Why not us? Ethan's first instinct was to laugh it off, to accuse Damian of joking. But Damian's gaze was steady, grounded, almost pleading, and Ethan's heart. His heart wasn't laughing. It was racing. He thought of Adrian, how reckless and unpredictable he'd been, how his love was a constant guessing game. He thought of Julian, how betrayal had come from the one person who was supposed to protect him. Then he thought of Damian, stable, honest, and somehow already intertwined in his healing process. Could he really marry someone after a month of knowing them? The logical part of him screamed no, but another part, the part that remembered crying at the bus station and finding Damian's presence like a lifeline, whispered yes. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice unsteady. If I say yes, Damian, this can't just be about your family's company. I can't go through another fake love story. Damian's expression softened, his hand brushing against Ethan's in a quiet promise. I don't want fake, Ethan, I want real. I can't promise perfection, but I can promise loyalty, and I think you deserve that much. The river shimmered under the city lights, the world moving around them, but in that moment, time seemed to pause. Ethan felt the weight of choice pressing down on him, but for the first time since Valentine's Day, it wasn't suffocating, it was liberating. And against all odds, Ethan smiled. Then yes, Damian, let's do it. Damian's relief was visible, his grin breaking through the usually composed demeanor. He pulled Ethan into a brief, grounding embrace. You won't regret this. For the first time in weeks, Ethan believed it. What began as heartbreak had led him here into the arms of possibility. And though the path ahead was uncertain, for once, uncertainty didn't feel like chaos, it felt like hope. The weeks after Ethan agreed to Damian's proposal felt surreal. What had begun as a desperate escape from heartbreak and family pressure slowly blossomed into something neither of them had expected: companionship that felt natural, conversations that turned into late-night confessions, and silences that were never heavy but comforting. Damian was steady. His presence was like the warmth of sunlight through a window. Not loud, not dramatic, but constant and grounding. Ethan often found himself wondering how he had stumbled into something so different from Adrian's chaos. With Damian, he didn't feel the need to perform or shrink himself. He could breathe. And yet, as the date for their first official family dinner approached, Ethan's nerves began to creep in. This wasn't just about Damian anymore. This was about stepping into a life that, weeks ago, he could never have imagined. That evening, Damian insisted on cooking breakfast at his apartment before they left. The scent of fresh coffee and eggs filled the small kitchen as Ethan sat on the counter, legs swinging, watching him move with surprising ease. You're too good at this, Ethan teased, sipping from his mug. Are you sure you're not secretly a chef instead of a doctor? Damian smirked without looking up. Don't spread it around. My family already thinks I'm too perfect. Ethan rolled his eyes, but the comment lingered. Perfect wasn't the word he'd use for Damian. Real was better. And in that kitchen, with Damian humming softly under his breath, Ethan realized that what scared him most wasn't failure, it was the possibility of truly being happy. They ate together, laughter bubbling between mouthfuls as they traded stories about their families. Damian spoke of his mother's obsession with appearances and his father's obsession with legacy, while Ethan confessed how his own mother had been texting nonstop, eager to meet the man who had so suddenly entered her son's life. You're nervous, Damian observed as he poured Ethan another cup of coffee. Of course I'm nervous, Ethan admitted, staring into the steaming mug. What if they think I'm not good enough for you? Damian reached across the table, resting his hand gently on Ethan's. Then they'll be wrong. You're more than enough, Ethan. Don't forget, I chose you, not them. The reassurance warmed him more than the coffee ever could. By the time evening fell, Ethan's nerves had shifted into a buzzing anticipation. Damian drove them to the restaurant where both families waited, his hand never straying far from Ethan's. The moment they stepped inside, Ethan's breath caught. Both families were already seated, faces alight with expectation, glasses clinking, conversations buzzing. Damian squeezed his hand before leading him forward. Ready, he whispered. As ready as I'll ever be, Ethan whispered back. The dinner began with polite introductions, but it didn't take long for warmth to settle in. Damian's family was formal yet surprisingly welcoming, while Ethan's mother couldn't stop smiling at how relaxed her son looked beside Damian. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he belonged not as someone's secret or someone's mistake, but as himself. Throughout the evening, Damian remained steady, always attentive, always grounding. He leaned close to explain inside jokes, he made sure Ethan's plate was never empty, and his glances across the table carried an affection that felt unmistakably real. At one point, Ethan caught his mother's gaze. She mouthed the words, "You look happy." Ethan blinked, startled, before realizing she was right. He was happy. Not the erratic highs of his past relationship, not the fragile hope that cracked under betrayal, but the kind of happiness that settled deep in his bones. Then, as though the universe wanted to test that newfound peace, Ethan's phone buzzed. A message. He hesitated, then glanced discreetly under the table. It was from Adrian. "I heard you're engaged. So soon. You don't really love him, Ethan. You're just running away from me." The words cut sharper than he expected, reopening wounds he thought had begun to heal. But instead of spiraling, Ethan felt a strange clarity. For the first time, Adrian's voice in his head didn't control him. It didn't matter. Damian's hand was wrapped around his, steady and sure, anchoring him to the present. Without hesitation, Ethan deleted the message. The liberation that followed was immediate, like unclenching a fist he hadn't realized was tight. Later, as dessert was served and laughter echoed around the table, Damian leaned close, his voice low enough for only Ethan to hear. "So, what do you think? Still willing to marry me, or has tonight scared you off?" Ethan turned, meeting his gaze with a small, steady smile. "We're not just planning a wedding, Damian. We're planning a life, and I want that with you." The words weren't rehearsed, but they were true. Every syllable rang with certainty. Damian's eyes softened, and before Ethan could react, he pressed a tender kiss to his temple. "That's all I needed to hear." The rest of the evening blurred into warm family toasts, shared laughter, promises of future gatherings. By the time they left, Ethan's chest ached not from sorrow, but from a fullness he had never known. Walking hand in hand to the car, Ethan glanced at Damian, his heart lighter than it had been in months. "Do you realize how crazy this is?" he asked. Half laughing, "Completely," Damian agreed, squeezing his hand. "But sometimes crazy is exactly what we need." Ethan stopped, pulling Damian gently toward him. In the glow of the streetlights, he kissed him softly at first, then with the certainty of someone who finally understood what it meant to choose love, not settle for its shadow. When they pulled apart, Ethan whispered, "I thought I'd lost everything that night at the bus station. But maybe that's the night I found what I was meant for." Damian's smile was quiet, certain, not what, Ethan, who. And with that, they climbed into the car, the night stretching ahead of them, not as a question, but as a promise. Ethan didn't know what the future would hold: challenges, changes, maybe even doubts. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid. Because love, he realized, wasn't about grand gestures or perfect appearances. It was about showing up, day after day, with loyalty, respect, and a steady heart. And in Damian, he had found all of that. The roses he once dropped in despair had long withered. But in their place, something stronger had bloomed, something real, something lasting, a love chosen,